In sessions, we're going to talk about placing photos on our workspace, when to use photos versus frames and backgrounds. We'll talk about editing photos and Magic Studio and a few other things. Now, in the previous session, we placed a photo on our desktop and in a frame, and I showed you how to avoid the photo dropping into the frame accidentally. Now we can place photos on our workspace simply by searching for the type of photo that we want to use and then clicking on the photo and placing it on our desktop. I'm going to add another page. We can also use photos as backgrounds. Now Canva has preset backgrounds. If we go to the sidebar and we scroll down, we'll see an option called background. Now if you don't see background, just go to apps, search for background, and it will come up. And you can just select the background icon and it will open up all of the backgrounds that are available to use. Now, what's the difference between photos and backgrounds? Well, when you select a photo to be placed on your workspace, it's just that one single photo that's placed in the middle of your workspace. But when we select a background, that will take up the whole workspace automatically. But it doesn't stop here. If we go back to the image that we placed on our workspace and we right-click, we have the option to set this image as our background. So when we click it, it fills up the entire screen. So really, we can use a preset background under the background tab, or we can set any photo as our background. Let's take another example. Now, when you're designing or coming up with your concept, you want to make sure that your design space is in proportion to the photos that you're going to be using. I know sometimes that can be hard. And that's why it's such a fantastic feature for Canva to have this resize and magic switch. But let me show you what I mean. If I go to the Elements tab and I search for women and I go to photos, we know that my workspace is more square shape than it is rectangular. Now, if I were to place this image on my workspace, we can immediately tell that the photo isn't the same proportion as my workspace. So if I go to the More option and I set this image as my background, part of the woman on the side is going to be cut off. If I double click, I can reposition it, but when I do, the woman on the right is going to be cut off. And this is what I mean when you need to make sure that any of the photos that you are using are in proportion to your workspace. Especially when you're working with shapes like circles, it's hard to fit a square peg in a circle. Just keep that in mind. Now, if you double click on this image and try and make it larger, what will happen is that the image will get further cut off. I'm going to create a new page. Now, there are a couple of different ways to upload photos into Canva. You can go to the upload section and select the purple button to upload a file from your computer, or you can just go into your files and find the document or the image or the photo that you want to add to Canva and simply click it and drag it onto your workspace. Wait for it to finish uploading in this area here, and just make sure that the check mark in the cloud is there and that you don't see 3 dots. If your image isn't on your workspace, just go to Uploads, Images, and select it to place it on your desktop. Now you might ask yourself, when do you use an image versus when do you use a frame? And the answer to that question is, it really depends on what you want your final design to look like. An image like this might look better in a frame. Let me grab a circle frame and let me place that image inside a frame. I'll grab that image and I'll put it inside of the frame. And I'll just place it here. I'm going to go back to Elements and I'm going to search for spa. And I'll go to See All. And I'll place a couple of photos on my workspace. I'm going to make this photo my background by right-clicking and going down to Set Image as Background. I'm going to double-click and I'm just going to bring that image up a little bit. And I still have my photo here. I'll just make that a little bit smaller like that. I'm going to go back to Elements, and again, I'm going to grab a circle frame. And I'll make another copy of that frame. And I'll just bring that right over there. And I'll resize this one as well and place it here. I'll go back to Elements and search for photos of spas. And I'll place a couple of more photos on my desktop. And I'll grab each of these photos and I'll place them in the frames. I'll just double click to reposition these photos so that they look a little bit better. I'm now going to search for a curved shape. And I'll go to Graphics and I'll grab this shape right here. I'm going to rotate it to 90 degrees and I'll place it right there. And I'm going to move this in just a bit and make it a little bit smaller. And I'll grab this shape and put it right here and make it larger. And I'll move it over and make it white. I'll make a duplicate of this shape by pressing Ctrl C and Ctrl V. And now I'll move these two shapes in behind those circle frames. As we can see, by using the 3 frames and placing those images in there, it truly has made a different design. Let's take another example. I'm going to create a new page. And I'm going to go to backgrounds and I'm going to search for a background. I'll place this as my background. I'm going to go back to elements and I'm going to search for a woman. And I'll go into photos. And I'll place a photo of this woman on my desktop. I'm going to apply the background remover. And I'll place the image here and make it a little bit larger like this. Now with this photo, it's really not necessary to have a frame. There are no harsh lines going around the body of this woman. And it looks like a pleasant or pleasing design, where a frame, it really is not needed. With the background of the photo removed, we didn't have to blend it into the background of the design. So by removing it, it made it really easier to make the design much more pleasing to the eye. If we go back up to the first image, we would not have been able to accomplish this design if we didn't place these images in the frame. Let me show you. If I remove or detach the images and just place square images here. It really would not look the same. It would just look like square images on top of square images. It wouldn't look organized and it would not look cohesive. By placing the images inside, it looks like a more softened and polished design. This design looks a lot more organized with the photos inside of the frames. Now, there is no right or wrong answer of when to use a frame and when not to use a frame. It really truly depends on your vision for your final design. I've got a new page here, and I'm going to place some graphics and some photos on my workspace. I'm going to go into elements, and in the search bar, I'm going to search for dogs. I'll go into graphics, and I'll place this graphic on my workspace. I'll also place this graphic on my workspace. And I'll go into photos and grab a photo. And I'll place this photo on my workspace. And I'll place it right there. Now I've got a couple of graphic images on my desktop. I've got this image and I've got this image here. Now these images are created differently. This image here is a raster image. This image here is a vector image. Vector images are created using mathematical equations, which allow us to resize the image and maintain the quality of the image. versus raster images that will become pixelated when they are resized to a higher length and width. Let's take a look now at how the toolbar changes when we select each element on our workspace. We've got two graphics and a photo. I'm going to select this graphic here. Let's take a look at the toolbar. In the toolbar, we don't have an option to change colors, but we do have an option to edit this graphic. We have the option to remove the background of the image. We have the option to apply a border to that graphic. We have the option to round corners. There is an option here to crop this image. We have the option to flip the image, to toggle transparency, animate, go to position and layers. We can copy the style that we apply to this graphic image. And we've got that double arrow that signifies more. Let's go back to the graphic. Now, we're not going to get into edit graphic right now, or edit photo, but you'll see next to it that there is the option to remove a background. And if we apply a color to our workspace background, there isn't a background on this graphic, so there's really no background to remove. Next to BG Remover is our border style, and if we select the border style, we're able to apply a border to this graphic. So if we apply a solid border, that border will actually appear around the perimeter, the outer perimeter of the graphic, not the perimeter of the dogs and the bone. So the border is actually square in nature as opposed to an outline around each dog and the bone. And we have all these other options for borders like we did in previous sessions on other elements. Now we also have the option to round the corners like we did with the other elements. And we have the option here to crop the graphic. When we select that crop element, we'll have a panel on the right side opening up. And that allows us to either crop that image freeform, or we can do 1:1 ratio or any of these other ratios. We can even rotate the image down here by toggling the slider or enter a number in here. Now I'm just going to press cancel and go back. Another way that we can crop this graphic or an image is by double clicking the element. That will again open up the panel on the side. But you'll also notice that the corners will be highlighted with little selectors that you can actually use to resize the image. And you can also crop the image if you want. But just note that when you're cropping images, that will crop out part of that graphic. To save that cropping, to save the graphic cropped like this, all you need to do is just click on a blank space, and that will set the cropping. Now you'll notice that on this graphic, there are also handles on the ends. And when we use these handles to crop the image, you guessed it, it will crop out part of the photo. Now, when you use this double-sided arrow at the bottom to rotate, you are rotating that image or that graphic as is. But if you go into the cropping panel, when you rotate the image here, you're actually resizing, rotating, and cropping your image. To get out of that, just cancel. Next to cropping is flip. And flip does exactly what it says it's going to do. It flips that graphic or the image as the case may be. Now there's the option to flip this graphic horizontally, and it just flips the sides from right to left, swapping those sides out. Or you can flip it vertically, making that image upside down. Next to flip is transparency, and we've seen this before, When you slide the slider down, it makes the graphic or image more transparent. We've gone over animate, we've gone over position layers, which is pretty much the same as we've seen with other elements. There are no changes here. When we copy the style though, we are actually copying the different tools that we have applied to this element. So I would expect that if I apply the same style to this graphic here, it will merely copy that border style. And there you go. Now, when I click on the more, we do have some other options, which we will go through shortly. But for now, let's go through the other elements on our workspace and compare the toolbar. I'd also like to note that the effects or adjustments that are available when we edit photos are going to differ from one graphic element to another and from a graphic element to a photo. So all these options will not be available for all the elements or photos or graphics that are on your workspace. Let's select this dog now and let's see what tools are available for the dog. We're going to notice that we also have edit photo or edit for this graphic. We're going to notice next to the edit that we have different color selectors. These color selectors coordinate with the colors that are on this graphic. So I could change this white color to purple, and that will change all of the white to purple. And the same with the rest of these colors. We can change them to any color that we want. Now you'll notice that this graphic here didn't have that option. And so the moral of the story is that not all graphics will have the same tools available to them. I'm going to press the undo button. Again, because we have applied a border to this, we have the option to change the border color. So whenever you apply a border, you also get a color chooser for that border, regardless of what element you have on your workspace. Again, we have border lines, we have corner rounding, we have cropping that works pretty much in the same way. We can also flip this object make it more transparent. We can animate, and that's similar to what we saw in the past. We can go to position layers. We can copy the style that we have applied through this toolbar from this element to another element. And we also have the double arrows where we can have access to more tools that we can apply to this graphic. Let's go back to the toolbar. We're now going to take a little dive into the edit feature. Now, when I click on edit, that will open up that right panel, just like when we selected those two arrows. And this panel will be very similar to the tools menu, and it will repeat items that were on that tools menu. If we go up to the top, we have an area where we can adjust that graphic. If we select adjust, we are able to modify the white balance of that graphic, the brightness, the color, and we are able to edit specific colors on that graphic similar to those color choosers that were on the toolbar. Now, this area works a little differently than the color choosers on that toolbar. And you will see this come up even for graphics that don't have color pickers on the toolbar. And I'll show you that in a minute. If we keep going down, we'll have an option to change the texture of the graphic. Underneath color edit, we'll have the option to change the texture of the graphic. Now, if you're comfortable changing any of these options, go ahead. You can certainly try and change them through trial and error. And if they don't work like how you want, you can always select the undo button. But you should be familiar with color before you start making any changes in this area here. Now, you'll also take a note that there is a caution note at the top that says adding effects or adjust settings to a vector graphic disables changing individual colors. And it's referring to those individual colors that were on top of the toolbar. Underneath adjust is the Magic Studio. Now, the Magic Studio is a pro feature, but it's not available for this graphic. So again, some tools are available for certain elements and some are not. If we look underneath Magic Studio, we'll notice filters. What are filters? Filters are just color combination that you can use to make an image or a graphic take on a specific color tone. And again, if you apply any of these filters, that may affect being able to change individual colors from the toolbar. But these are the options that are available. And if you wanted to make this graphic black and white, you can do that here under the mono section. Now, underneath mono, it has these really cool color pop filters that you can also use. I'm going to scroll all the way back up to the top. Now, before we leave this section, if you want to apply any of these filters, just click on them and that will apply the filter. I'm going to press the undo button and go back. And I'll just click back to go back to that regular panel under graphics. Underneath filters, we're going to notice effects. And we're going to come back to effects later on. We'll also note that there is a little section here for additional apps that you can use with photos when you are working with them. So if you wanted to place this element or another element in a mockup, you could quickly select the mockup apps, select a mockup, and then place your element in there automatically. Now we're not going to go through mockups. I'm just showing you where the mockups panel is. This is more of an advanced feature, and if you'd like to know more about this, just reach out and I can assist you. I'll go back. We'll see some other apps that are also available in this section here for you to use. And there are so many more apps in the apps section that are available for you to use with different elements and images. Now underneath apps, we're going to notice that this area here kind of repeats with what was on the toolbar. So here are our graphic colors. We're able to crop and flip. We can assign a border color. We can adjust the corners, transparency. We can animate. We can go to position layers, and we can copy the style. I'm going to close this panel now, and let's select this image here. Let's go back to edit. Now you'll notice here that we do have the option to change the border color. As we saw previously, the option to change colors is in here. Let's go into edit photo. Now when we edit this photo or graphic, again, we're going to see adjust. And now new in this area, we are able to select either the whole image, the foreground, or the background. And that is to allow us to apply these settings to either the background or the foreground or both. Now, if we scroll down these settings at the bottom, we will see an area for color edit. Now, we didn't have color choosers on our toolbar, but we do have that option under adjust, which means we are able to change these colors in this graphic through adjust. How do you use it? Well, if you select one of the colors like the brown, that will open up the panel for hue and saturation. Now, hue allows us to select a color on the color wheel. So we can toggle the slider up to change the color. And as you can see, the color is changing, but it's changing everywhere that that color would be. And then we can customize that color further by adjusting the saturation. So if we wanted to make that purple, we can make that purple like that. That's just a notation for you to note, just in case you do come across an element where you're unable to change the color from the toolbar. Remember, you can always go into adjust. I'm going to reset the adjustments. And you can do that too if you're just not liking the end result. I'm going to scroll back up to the top and press the arrow back. We'll notice also that underneath adjust, we have Magic Studio. We're going to get into Magic Studio a little later. We have the option for filters, just like we did for that graphic. And we also have the option for effects. Now I'm going to go back to this image here. So I'll close this panel and I'm going to flip it right side up again. And I'm also going to undo the cropping that I had done previously. I'll go back into edit and I'll go down to effects. And we're going to go through these one at a time. The first item under effects is shadow. Now, when we click shadow, we have all of these options. I'm going to go through all of these options. I'm going to create a new page, and I'm going to make this page white. I'm now going to take a copy of this graphic and paste it on this page. I'm going to remove the border from this graphic, and I'm going to resize it and move it right up to the top. And I'm going to make a copy of this graphic. I'll make 7 copies. Let's go back into Edit and let's go back to Shadows. And we're going to apply all of these to see how we can customize each one. Now, shadows for elements are similar to shadows for text. The same customizations are going to apply. When I select glow, you'll see on the bottom there'll be an option for the size of the glow. We'll have an option for blur. So as I increase it, the blur around that element increases, but it also scales my element and makes it smaller. We can toggle the color intensity to make it darker, to make it look more like a diffused outline, or we can make it less intense. And we can change the color by just moving that circle slider selector over. I'll select the second element and I'm going to select drop. Drop is one of my favorite shadow effects. With drop shadow, we can toggle the blurring amount. We can change the angle of the shadow. We can change the distance of the shadow. We can change the color of the shadow. And we can change the intensity of the shadow to make it very, very opaque or more transparent. Let's select the third element and let's select outline. Now, outline allows you to place a color directly around your element. But in order to use this feature and the other features in shadow effects, you should have an element with a transparent background. Otherwise, this will not give you the right effect. So remember that. You have to be working with an element that has a transparent background. Now with outline, or going back to outline, we can determine the size of that outline border. We can determine the color and the intensity of that outline. Now we cannot add multiple shadow effects to one element. But the way around that is to download that element as a transparent image and then bring it back into Canva to apply your second shadow. And repeat that for as many shadows as you want to apply. I'm going to select my fourth element, and this time I'm going to choose curved. Now this applies a curved shadow. And we can determine the blur amount, the distance, and the amount of curve that you want to apply. We can also determine the intensity. And with this option, we also have the option to select a color, like with the rest of the shadows. Moving on to my fifth element, we have page lift, which is the opposite of curved. So it curves in the center. And again, we have the option for blur amount, for distance. We have the amount of curve, and we can select the color. And we also have the option to select the intensity. Now with my sixth element, we're going to try angled. And angled is exactly what it says. It just makes the shadow and turns it or twists it so that it is angled. And again, we have the option to customize the blur amount, the rotation, the color, and the intensity. And finally, the last element is applying a shadow with a backdrop effect. And this is super cool. So we have the option for the blurring amount, the direction of that drop shadow, the color, and the intensity. And that's pretty much all about shadows. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments. I'm going to press the back arrow to go back. So that was shadows. I'm going to add another page. And I'm going to go to elements. And I'm going to search for a dog and place a dog on my workspace. So I'll just place this dog on my workspace. Now this dog has a transparent background, and he is not one color. He is multicolored. He's black, he's brown, he's white, and he's got this pink tongue. Now let's say I want to make this dog all black. It doesn't have, the toolbar doesn't show a color chooser because this is an image. But if we go to Edit and we come down to Effects, we can use duotone to change the color of the dog to all black. I'm going to select duotone. Duotone is like filters. It has preset filters that will change the highlights of a photo and the shadow of the photo. So we can choose any of these filters to change the color of the dog. But we can also change the dog to a monochromatic shade like black and gray or black and white. And we can also change the color of the dog to be all black or all white or all of any color really. Let's go back up to the top and I'll select none. We'll notice that with all these other preset colors, there's also the option for custom. I'm going to select custom. Now it automatically defaults to a highlight of white and shadows of black. But I have the option to change these colors. And I'm going to leave the shadow to black. But I'm now going to come to the highlights and I'm also going to change that to black. Do you see what happens to the dog? The dog is now all black. Well, it's a little bit lighter over here, and that's probably because the shadows are not all black. But let's go back in there and let's just bring that selector all the way down. And now you'll notice it is totally black. We can do the same thing to make this dog white. So let's take the dog again. Let's go to Edit. Let's go to Duotone. Let's go to Highlights. Let's change that color selector to white for highlights and white for shadows. And now we've turned that dog to all white. And literally you can download this and use it however you like. Now, not only can you change it to a solid black or white, you can change it to a solid of any color whatsoever. A tip is once that you find the color that you want, and you can also use the dropper tool, is just copy that color and paste it into the highlights color so that you're using the same color. Remember, to make a solid, you have to update both highlights and shadows. Let's press the back arrow and go back. Next to duotone is blur. Now I'm going to grab a photo in my elements and I'm going to place it on my desktop. I'll just create a new page and I'll change the page background color to white. I'll go back into elements and I'll place this photo on my workspace. I'll click Edit Photo and I'll go to blur. Now with blur, we have the option to use a brush or apply a blur to the whole image. And when would you use one versus another? Well, if you want to use this image as a background, but you don't want to be able to see the details of the photo, you can apply blur to the whole page. You can also use a brush just to blur maybe the face of an individual for privacy reasons. Let's use the brush tool and I'll reduce the size of the brush on the face of this individual for privacy. Now we also have the option for brush size and intensity, but the intensity has to be set before you actually use the brush tool. I didn't set the intensity, so it was already preset at 25. I'm going to remove the blur and I'm going to decrease the intensity and use the brush tool again to blur the image. And now it's blurred, but not as blurred as it was before. And you can just continue to apply that blur until you get a blurring effect that you like. And that's how we use the blur feature. Let's go back. The next option next to blur is autofocus. Now I'm going to press the undo button to undo that blurring effect. And let's go back into autofocus. Now autofocus allows us to blur parts of the photo while focusing in on a section of the photo that we want to zoom in or focus in on. So we have two options for autofocus. We have blur intensity, which we can toggle up or down. And we have the focus position where we want to focus that clarity on. So we can move that clarity around the photo to our preferred place. And if you've made a mistake, you can always remove the autofocus. And that's how autofocus works. So that purple highlight area is what the focus of the photo is going to be changed to. Right now, the purple is focus. So where you see the purple is where the focus or clarity of the photo is going to be. If I change the focus and turn it to the background, then that will make the foreground blurry. Let's remove the autofocus and let's go back. Beside autofocus is face retouch. I'm going to delete this photo and place this photo on my workspace. Let's go back into edit and let's move over to face retouch. Now, I have the option to toggle the smoothness of the skin. Now, as I toggle the slider up, it's going to smooth the skin to give it the appearance that it has less imperfections. If I toggle this down, we'll see more of those imperfections. And that's how face retouch works. It's not perfect 100%, but there is a little note here that says face retouch currently works best on individual portraits. We'll be launching the full version soon. So there is a full version on its way for face retouch. So can't wait to see that. I'll go back up to the top. I'm going to take a copy of this image and I'm going to place it on a new page. And I'll place it here. I'm going to resize this image and just make it a little bit larger so that we can see it. I'll close this panel over here and just make our screen a little bit larger. And I'll bring it all the way to the edges and extend it like that. Now I'm going to select this photo. And one of the things that I can do is remove the background. Now, background remover is a pro feature. I would subscribe to Canva Pro just for the background remover. It is so convenient. But don't despair, because there are other background remover tools that you can use. And one is right in the apps section. Just search for background remove. There's background eraser, there's clear background, and there is replace background. These are all apps that are within Canva that are free to use to remove the background. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to select my photo again, and I'm going to go back to edit. Now you'll notice that the toolbar is pretty much very similar to what we've seen in the other graphic elements. But I'm now going to take a deeper dive into edit and the Magic Studio. Now the first item on Magic Studio is the background remover. I'll remove the background and show you what that looks like. And as you can see, the background has been removed. Now, anything with a crown is a pro feature. I'm going to undo the background remover, and I'm going to move on to the next one, which is Magic Eraser. I'm going to select Magic Eraser and just erase one dog from my photo. And we have the option to work with a brush or just to click an item to remove it. Either one is fine. Use whichever one works best for you. I'm going to select the click option and I'm going to come down and select this dog and I'll say erase. And Canva will go to work to erase that little dog. Now it may take a while, just be patient. 5 minutes later. Okay, so here we go. It has removed that dog and it's filled in this brown dog with another limb in the back. Now, Canva AI generation isn't perfect, so if it doesn't work well, then you might have to find some other way of adjusting your photo. Let's go back. Now the next feature next to Magic Eraser is Magic Grab. And what Magic Grab allows us to do is it allows us to grab a certain element in our photo with the option to use it in another design. Now I'm going to use the click option like I did before, and I'm going to come here and I'm going to click this little dog here. Now Magic Grab works best with items that you can see all of it. It doesn't work well on an object like this because part of the dog is cut off and Canva cannot create that part of the dog for you to use somewhere else. So Magic Grab, what it does is it will grab a certain element for you to use in another design. So while Magic Grab is working, it's magic. It will show you that it is finished by placing a purple line around the element that it has isolated from the rest of the photo. And you can literally take that element and move it somewhere else for you to use. Now next to Magic Grab is Grab Text. And I don't have any text on this workspace, but let me place some text on it and I'll show you how it works. So I'm going to take this and I will download it and I'll only want page 4. I'll add another page and just wait for that to finish downloading, and then I'll slide it over back into my workspace. Now I'll just make my background white so that you can see the image. Let's go back into Edit and let's go to Grab Text. Now I'm going to use the click feature to select the text I want to grab. And once I've done that, I'll say grab. Now this works really well if you've got an image with text that maybe is spelled wrong or you want to replace that text. Just note that when you are replacing that text, you might not be able to match that font exactly. Canva will try and recommend a font that is closest to the text that it has grabbed. And here is the text that it's grabbed. And also, you might have a little bit of a shadow where you removed that text. So if I click in there now, I'm able to edit the text and place it back on the design like that. Let's go back up to this photo and let's click on Edit Photo and go back to Magic Studio. Now if we cursor over, we're going to see that we also have the option for Magic Edit. Now, Magic Edit will customize your photo with special attributes that you place into a text box. So for example, if I wanted to change the color of this dog to black, I'm going to use the brush tool and I'm going to select this dog. And in the box here, I'm going to say change color to black. And I'll say generate. Now you can do this with clothing, you can do this with accessories, pants, t-shirts, whatever. The possibilities are limitless, really. So here you see Canva has returned 4 options for you to use, and you can just select the option that works best for you. So I think that's pretty good. So I'll leave it at that and I'll say done. Now, if you didn't like what Canva did, you can always say generate again. Okay, and there is the final product. Let's go back into Magic Studio, and there was one more option to Magic Expand. I've created a new page and I'm going to go over to Elements and I'm going to search for family. I'll go into See All and I'm going to place this image on my background. Now, notice that this image, the heads of the father and mother are cut off. Now, what were to happen if I were to place this image into a circle frame? So here is a circle frame. Let's drop this image inside of my circle frame. Now, as you can see, the head is cut off. This really doesn't make for a very good image or design. But let's say we were able to expand this image, and that's what Magic Expand does. So let's detach this image and let's go over to Magic Studio and let's go to Magic Expand. Now we have the option to do freeform, the whole page. You can convert this image to the whole page. I'm going to stay with freeform, but there are all these other options. And I'm going to move these corners all the way up and expand that image from the top. And if you want to expand from the bottom, you can do that as well. But I'm going to leave it like that. And I'll come back to Magic Expand and I'll press that purple button, Magic Expand. And here Canva has created 4 different possibilities for us to use. I'm going to stick with the first design and I'm going to place it in my circle frame. So now, as you see, there's a little bit of space up at the top. If I double click, I have more room to move from side to side because my image is more square-like. Let's compare those 2 images. I'll just make a copy of the first and I'll go back to Elements, my recent designs, and I'll put the original photo inside. So which one do you like better? This photo or this one here where we can see a little bit more space around? So That is one way of using Magic Studio and Magic Expand. Magic Expand is also a great tool when your workspace is mismatched with a photo or an element that you are using. It's a great tool. And that pretty much wraps up everything that you need to know about working with photos and graphics. In the next session, we're going to overview how to work with videos, how to download them, and how to create animations and presentations.